I am the HR vampire, but even I was freaked out by some scary, eerie, unsettling interviews that I conducted during my long career in HR. Now, to give you fair warning, some of the things that happened might be upsetting or disturbing. They sure upset and disturbed me. So let's start with a story that could have ended very, 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 very differently. I was in charge of HR for a hospital. It was April 1st, 1997, when I interviewed a murderer. Now, this was in the days before applicant tracking systems. Kimberly Harris filled out a paper application in the hospital lobby. She applied for a job as a nursing assistant. Now, we were desperate for staff, and so I asked her there and then to take a nursing assistant test. Now, I am well aware of the irony of meeting with a soon-to-be killer on April Fool's Day. Kim was polite, quiet. She was dressed in clean, neat scrubs. She sat in my office across from me. I asked her about her work at a long-term care facility in Louisville. She'd worked there less than a year and a half. Kim says she wasn't employed there anymore because she moved from Louisville to Elizabethtown. She gave me the director of nursing's name and phone number to call for a reference. So I passed the application along to the nursing manager and I scheduled an interview. Kim didn't show up. She didn't call. And so I tried to call her and left her a message. She never responded. The next thing I knew, there was an article in the newspaper. Kim was only 23 years old when she gunned down the director of nursing and the executive director of the nursing home on April 29, 1997. So just weeks after I talked to her. Now remember, Kim had listed the director of nursing as a reference. Witnesses said that Kim shot the women several times and then she kicked them as they lay dead or dying. The police officer who arrested her asked Kim why she did it. She said it was because the women had fired her. Now, at first, Kim was ruled incompetent to stand trial, and so it was several years later before she came to trial. The psychiatrist testified that she suffered from delusions, hallucinations, and mood swings. Now, she'd also stuck a hypodermic needle in her ear to try to stop the voices in her head. She was found guilty and she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. So now we could fast forward to 2022. Kim had a parole hearing. She talked about what happened that day when she killed the two women. She said she was in her car outside the nursing home thinking about suicide. Instead, she gunned those two women down. She had 60 bullets in her car. During the parole hearing, Kim said that God had healed her mental issues. She said, God controls her thoughts now. The parole board asked her about the times she had gotten in physical altercations while she was in prison. She told the parole board that getting criticized or corrected for something she'd done wrong set her off. She was not granted parole. Now, sometimes I think about that day that she sat in my office and we talked. If she'd followed through with that interview with the nursing manager, I am 100% certain that we would have hired her. She had a calm and respectful demeanor, and we were desperate for staff. And so sometimes when I think back to those days, I feel like I literally dodged a bullet. Now, in the second situation I wanted to talk about, I had an open position in my own department. I had an open position that would report to me. The candidate that I interviewed had HR experience from a local distillery. Now, in case you're not familiar with it, Kentucky has tons of distilleries. I live on the Bourbon Trail. I can smell the fumes, and I can't swing a rubber chicken without hitting a distillery. Now, as I interviewed the person on Zoom, the shelves behind him caught my attention. The shelves were crowded with liquor bottles. I guess I could see why he had bottles of alcohol on his shelf behind him, because he worked at a distillery. But our organization was very, very, very conservative. Now, those bottles made me wonder if he should have added honky-tonk in to his resume. Maybe that's an important skill in his role at the distillery. Needless to say, the bottles left a lasting impression, but not in the way that he hoped. So I'll move on to the third situation, and that took place several years ago. I interviewed an information technology specialist. He was so pleased with himself. He crowed about breaching the Kentucky government information system. He was so proud of his hiking. He was certain it was going to earn him a promotion. Instead, his hiking activities got him fired. Now, that one was a pretty easy decision for me. We didn't hire him. So we'll move on to the fourth situation. And that one took place when I worked in HR for another hospital. Now, even these years later, nursing assistants were still hard to find. And so we did mass interviews for nursing assistants for open jobs on all shifts. I talked to an older woman. She said she lost her son. I offered her my condolences. She said, "You live by the gun, you die by the gun." And so I was processing that. You live by the gun, you die by the gun. She said that she did have a felony on her own record. She said back when her son was young, gang members tried to recruit the kid. She was out in her car. She saw the gang members on a sidewalk in downtown Louisville, and she plowed into them, and she injured some of them. Now, she made sure I understood. She paid her debt to society with the 7 years that she served in prison. She said it wasn't fair to hold that felony against her because it wasn't enough to save her son. And so her story broke my heart. But we couldn't hire her to take care of vulnerable patients because of that felony conviction. So finally, we'll get to the last strange interview. I was part of a hiring panel to fill an important job that worked with young people. We interviewed a professor from a Kentucky university. One of the panel members asked the professor, why was he looking for a change? He said he was upset over the dean's refusal to make the professor's program a priority. He said, now this is the professor talking about his program. He said, I wanted to pull a condom over the program to protect it. Protect his program with a condom? What the heck? I thought I'd misunderstood. And so I looked around the room. Nope. Eyes were wide, mouths were open. I had heard correctly. Nobody was sure what to say. And so I stood up and I thanked him for his time. He wasn't finished though. He said, I need to give you a heads up. A news story is probably going to hit soon, he said. He was accused of conducting an inappropriate relationship with one of his students, a quid pro quo based on grades. He said the university knew he was innocent, but they would fire him soon because of the optics. Professor Brown Chicken Brown Cow did not get hired. And so these interviews remind me that weird things happen in real life. Have you ever experienced a bizarre interview, whether as the interviewee or the interviewer? Share your stories in the comments below. I really appreciate you watching. If you liked the video, I would love it if you could click on like and subscribe to hear more from me, the HR Vampire.